In 1978, police made a discovery under one house that would change how America viewed clowns forever. What they found buried in that crawl space wasn't just bodies. It was evidence of the most chilling double life in criminal history. Now imagine this. It's December 11th, 1978 in Des Plaines, Illinois, a quiet suburb just northwest of Chicago. The temperature is hovering around freezing, and most families are preparing for the Christmas season just 2 weeks away. But inside one particular house on Summerdale Avenue, the police are about to uncover something that will haunt this community for decades. The house belonged to a 36-year-old man named John Wayne Gacy. And if you had met Gacy just a few days before this discovery, you probably would have liked him. He was charismatic, successful, and well known in his community. He ran a construction company, was active in local democratic politics, and perhaps most memorably, he performed as a clown at children's hospitals and charity events. His clown persona was called Pogo the Clown, and he had hand-painted the costume himself. Kids loved him. Parents trusted him. Neighbors thought he was a pillar of the community. But what the police found under his house that December day revealed that John Wayne Gacy was living the ultimate double life, and that his friendly, colorful clown exterior was hiding one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. So today, I'm going to tell you the full story of John Wayne Gacy, how a man seen as a community leader became one of America's most infamous serial killers. Just a heads up, while this story is toned down, it still deals with unsettling themes. John Wayne Gacy was born on March 17, 1942 in Chicago, Illinois. From the beginning, his relationship with his father was difficult. His dad, a blue-collar worker with a strict outlook on masculinity, didn't quite understand John. Gacy was more interested in things like cooking and helping around the house, which only made the tension worse. He was often criticized and rarely praised. Even so, Gacy came across as outgoing and likable. He joined the Boy Scouts, held part-time jobs, and made friends easily. But not everything in his childhood was so simple. He faced experiences that left deep emotional scars, things he kept to himself for years. In high school, Gacy started dealing with health issues, including fainting spells. Doctors eventually found a blood clot near his brain, and he was hospitalized for a time. It was also around then that he began feeling mentally detached in certain situations, something he later described as episodes of disconnection from reality. After school, he briefly enrolled in business college but dropped out and took a job in Las Vegas. There, he worked at a funeral home for a short period. Decades later, he would describe moments from that time that hinted at a growing emotional disturbance. Though back then, no one saw it as a warning sign. By the mid-60s, Gacy was back in Illinois and on the surface, thriving. He married Marlyn Myers, the daughter of a fast food franchise owner, and took an active role in the business. He was energetic, friendly, and ambitious, someone people trusted and wanted to be around. The couple moved to Waterloo, Iowa, where Gacy managed one of the restaurants. He became involved in local politics, joined the JCs, and was even named Man of the Year by the organization in 1967. To everyone who knew him, John Wayne Gacy was a success story, a young businessman with a bright future. But behind closed doors, Gacy was already showing signs of the predatory behavior that would define his later crimes. In 1967, Gacy was accused of sexually assaulting a teenage employee at the restaurant. The boy, Donald Voorhees, told his father that Gacy had tricked him into being tied up and then assaulted him. When Voorhees Sr. confronted Gacy, Gacy actually offered to pay the man $300 to keep quiet about the incident. But Donald Voorhees wasn't Gacy's only victim during this period. Other young male employees came forward with similar stories. And when one 18-year-old named Russell Schroeder agreed to testify against Gacy, something truly sinister happened. Gacy hired another teenager to assault Schroeder with mace and try to intimidate him into not testifying. The plan backfired spectacularly when the would-be attacker went to the police instead. In December 1968, Gacy was convicted of sodomy and sentenced to 10 years in prison. His wife divorced him, and he lost all contact with his children. It seemed like his carefully constructed life had completely fallen apart. But here's the thing about John Wayne Gacy. He was incredibly good at reinventing himself. Gacy served his time at the Iowa State Reformatory, and by all accounts, he was a model prisoner. He earned his high school diploma, worked in the kitchen, and became involved in the prison's JC's chapter. He was so well behaved that he was released on parole after serving just 18 months of his 10-year sentence. But while Gacy appeared to be rehabilitated, prison had actually taught him some very dangerous lessons. He learned how to be more careful, how to better manipulate people, and most importantly, how to avoid getting caught. When Gacy was released in June 1970, he moved back to Chicago to live with his mother, and almost immediately, he began rebuilding his life with the same methodical approach he would later apply to his crimes. He got a job as a cook and started dating again. In 1972, he married a woman named Carol Hoff, who was a divorcee with 2 young daughters. Around the same time, Gacy started his own construction company, which he called PDM Contractors. The business was legitimate and successful. Gacy was a skilled contractor who did quality work, and his natural charisma made him excellent at winning over clients. He bought a house at 8213 West Summerdale Avenue in unincorporated Norwood Park Township, the house that would later become known as one of the most infamous crime scenes in American history. But even as Gacy was building this new, respectable life, he was also developing the methods and the mindset that would make him one of America's most prolific serial killers. And it was around this time that he first put on the Pogo the Clown costume. By the mid-1970s, John Wayne Gacy had achieved everything he thought he wanted. His construction business was thriving, making him genuinely wealthy. He was active in local Democratic politics and had even met First Lady Rosalind Carter at a campaign event. He performed regularly as Pogo the Clown at children's parties and charity functions, and he had created what appeared to be a stable family life with Carol and her daughters. But beneath this perfect exterior, Gacy was harboring increasingly violent fantasies and urges. His marriage to Carol began to deteriorate as she noticed strange smells coming from the crawl space under their house. Gacy told her it was just moisture and sewer problems, but the odor was actually something far more sinister. Carol also noticed that Gacy would often disappear for hours at night, claiming he was checking on construction sites. In reality, Gacy had begun what he would later call his cruising activities. He would drive around Chicago, particularly in areas known for gay bars and hangouts, looking for young men. Gacy himself was deeply conflicted about his sexuality. He had been married twice to women and maintained that he was not gay, but virtually all of his victims were young men. His method was almost always the same. He would approach young men, often teenagers or men in their early 20s, and offer them work with his construction company. Many of his victims were runaways or young men who were struggling financially, making them perfect targets for Gacy's predatory behavior. Once he got them to his house, Gacy would use what he called his rope trick. He would convince the young men to let him demonstrate how handcuffs worked, or he would show them a magic trick involving rope. But once they were restrained, the situation would turn deadly. Gacy later claimed that all of his murders were either in self-defense or accidental, that he never intended to kill anyone. But the evidence suggests something far more calculated and cruel. According to Gacy, his first murder happened in 1972. He claimed the incident was spontaneous, saying it involved a teenager he had invited home. Gacy told authorities it was a moment of panic and self-defense, but investigators would later find inconsistencies in that account, suggesting the act was deliberate. What stood out most was how Gacy described the feeling afterward. He said it gave him an overwhelming rush, one that, in his own words, made him feel powerful. And that sense of control quickly became something he craved again. Over the next several years, Gacy continued living a double life. On the surface, he was still the successful businessman and local volunteer. But privately, he was targeting vulnerable young men, many of whom had few people looking out for them. Some were experiencing homelessness, others were looking for work or simply passing through town. Gacy would offer them jobs, food, or a place to stay. Then, they'd disappear. As time went on, Gacy became bolder. He devised a routine. Once at his home, He'd perform his so-called rope trick, luring his victims into a false sense of safety before revealing his true intentions. Many never made it out alive. Eventually, the crawl space beneath his house began to fill. To cover his tracks, Gacy started using other parts of the property. Later, some victims were disposed of off-site entirely. Despite the mounting risk, he kept going. People who knew Gacy during this time didn't suspect a thing. He continued throwing neighborhood parties, attending city events, and even hosting political fundraisers at his home, all while hiding a horrific secret just beneath the floorboards. But his carefully maintained facade would finally start to crack in December of 1978. That month, a 15-year-old boy named Robert Peast vanished from a pharmacy where he worked part-time. He had mentioned to his mother that a man, someone involved in construction, had offered him a job. That was the last anyone heard from him. Robert's family reported him missing immediately. They were persistent, and they pushed the police to act. Their urgency paid off. Investigators soon learned that the man Robert had spoken to was John Wayne Gacy. At first, Gacy denied ever meeting the boy, but inconsistencies in his story began to raise red flags. Officers requested to search his home, and while they didn't find anything obvious right away, one detail stuck with them: the overpowering smell inside the house, particularly near the vents and the crawl space. It wasn't long before a search warrant was issued. On December 21, 1978, authorities returned to Gacy's home with a full warrant, and what they found beneath the floor changed everything. Human remains, multiple sets, all hidden beneath the house in carefully dug trenches. It was a discovery so shocking that even seasoned detectives had to rotate in shifts because of the overwhelming odor and emotional toll. In total, investigators recovered 26 bodies from the crawl space, with additional victims found elsewhere, including some recovered from a nearby river. News of the arrest and the scope of the crimes spread across the country like wildfire. The idea that a man so embedded in his community could be responsible for something so unthinkable sent shockwaves through every neighborhood that had once welcomed him. But beyond the headlines and sensationalism were the victims, each of them a real person with a story, a family, a future. Robert Peast, whose case finally brought Gacy down, was just beginning his life. He was thoughtful, hardworking, and saving for college. There was John Butkovich, a former employee who had gone to Gacy's house to collect a paycheck and was never seen again. Timothy O'Rourke had dreams of becoming a musician. Others were students, brothers, sons, each of them hoping for a better path. Many had faced difficult circumstances, which made them easy to overlook in a time when certain disappearances didn't receive the same urgency. In February 1980, John Wayne Gacy stood trial for the murders. His defense team claimed he was mentally unwell and not fully responsible for his actions. But prosecutors argued otherwise, showing how methodically the crimes had been carried out. The jury took just a few hours to reach a verdict, guilty on all counts. Gacy was sentenced to death. While on death row, he continued to deny responsibility. He gave interviews, created paintings, and became a dark icon of American criminal history. But he never expressed genuine remorse. On May 10, 1994, John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection. His last meal was fried chicken, and his final words, according to some reports, were, "Kiss my ass." To this day, the Gacy case remains one of the most disturbing examples of how evil can hide in plain sight. It changed how authorities handle missing persons cases, especially involving young men. It also left a lingering scar on American pop culture, where clowns, once symbols of joy, became figures of fear. But beyond the symbolism and headlines, it's the victims we should remember. Many remain unidentified. Families still wait for answers, and their stories, unfinished and stolen, are what give this tragedy its true weight. What the world learned from John Wayne Gacy is something we're still reckoning with, that sometimes the most horrifying monsters don't look like monsters at all.